Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Lori Amin, will interview published authors to chat about their work, journey to getting published, and their book recommendations. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us.
Hi, Emma. Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So happy to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Emma Scott, as you said. I've been publishing since 2014. That's when I wrote my first book and kind of drop kicked it into Amazon. And then and with like no social media presence, no webpage, no nothing. I was just like, here I go. And then like 9 people read it. And I was like, oh, it's going to take some work. So, but I had so much fun doing it. And so I wrote another and then another, and it just has kind of grown from there. And I really love writing love stories. And on a practical or whatever matter, I live in San Francisco, California. Well, I live in the San Francisco area. I live in Menlo Park. And I have my little daughter, Talia, and my husband, Bill, and we have a Maltese named Hamilton. And so that's a little bit about me. I don't know if you need or want more.
Yeah, we'll dive into it. So what inspired you to become a writer? Like, what inspired you to write the first novel?
Well, I've always known that I was going to be a writer probably since I was a little kid, but I was always thinking I was going to write fantasy novels. I was really into fantasy. I read Dragonlance. I played D&D, and I have written a few fantasy novels actually, like back in high school, which of course are like, they'll never see the light of day. But I was thinking that's the only thing I would do. And then I was entering a contest where they tell you the genre you have to write. And so I got romance. And so I wrote the story that was in romance. And I realized that even my fantasy novels always had this like romantic subplot, or not even a subplot, like a central love story to the stories. And I was like, wow, this is kind of what I'm already doing, just fantasy. And so I expanded that story from the contest into a full-length novel. That was the first novel. Mm-hmm. And I realized this is what I want to do. This is what I love more. I still love fantasy, and I'll probably go back. And I've written one that's the start of a series, but fantasy takes a lot of work and time and world building. So you can't kind of be writing them like once every 3 or 4 months. At least I can't. It takes a lot more work. So, but in the meanwhile, I'm absolutely just loving contemporary romance. I just kind of found my calling on it.
I love this. And so let's talk about like getting your book published and growing your audience and like what it takes to, to have a brand, what was the process like, because I know you mentioned like only 9 people may have read the first book, but probably there's more now. There's
Well, that was like my friends and family were the first to go, and then it trickled after that. But it was a really interesting process. Like I was just kind of was learning as I went, and of course I realized that Facebook has this amazing romance community. And so I got my page, and then I, had a few readers and such. But mostly what I think I did was above and beyond any kind of marketing, because I didn't have any ads. I didn't know anything about that. I just wrote the next book, and I had a really great time writing it. And then I wrote the next book, and they came out relatively quickly. And so they kind of built off each other, so that by the time that third book came around, which was Rush, I had a following. And then I kind of was getting more savvy about like, marketing and teasers and everything that you see authors do. Like this was back in 2014. I don't know. I know authors were doing teasers, of course, and having that kind of thing back then, but it was like, it was just kind of a different time. Like the process and the community evolves and changes so much. But I was learning as I went, and I just kind of like cultivated my group on Facebook, on my page on Facebook, which also was different back then. If I'm being perfectly honest, it was much better. Facebook has changed pages so much that I'm sorry to say it's not anywhere near as good as a group now. But back then it was a really great place to talk to my readers, and I just talked to them constantly. I think that was one of the things I did that was, I guess you could say, successful if you're in building a brand. But I really wanted to talk to them. I felt so grateful that they were reading my books and they wanted to talk about them to me. Like it was kind of crazy. So I spent a lot of time doing that when I wasn't doing the actual writing, and I built some really great relationships, I think, with early readers that I still carry to this day. So that was my the one thing I think I did successfully, and the one thing I really love and is most important to me.
I love this. I love the fact that, we get access, and with social media, we get access to authors, and it's just an opportunity for us to gossip about it and to be like, oh my gosh, like, tell me, what else you're working on, and I think that's a
Yeah.
really great thing that we do
It's
have.
super great. It's so fun to talk to readers, and it's even greater to actually meet them in person at signings, which has been, rough this year, not being able to do that, because I think that's such an important part for me. And I know a lot of authors too will agree that being able to see their readers face to face and give them a hug and everything, it's kind of crucial. And to not have been able to do that this year has been really kind of hard.
Yeah, I do. I miss signings. I was like, I realized there's like so much just missed opportunities. I was thinking about book conferences and I was like, I wish I could go to the book conference. It's like, no, it's not happening,
Yeah.
So let's talk about your writing process. Are you a plotter or are you a pantser? Like, do you follow an outline or do you see where the story leads you?
Well, so I think I'm on my 19th book, and I think I finally sort of kind of figured out my process. It used to be just like like literally my process was set an Amazon pre-order and then write like hell to make sure you hit it. And like, I just was kind of having mental burnout on doing that. But I'm a pantser and a plotter in the sense that I have to have a little bit of an outline to start. Like I have to know the ending of the book, at least generally, and I have to have a basic outline of like key scenes and important moments in the book. And then I outline it, but inevitably the story changes as I go and the characters change and they do things and they say things I didn't think about or plan, or, a new character will pop up and be 10 times more important than I had initially thought. And so then the outline itself changes. So I have I have a cork board and I have note cards. And so I outline each chapter on a note card and I'll do about 20 chapters. And then, but as I go, if I finish a chapter, I get to pull it off the cork board and it's fabulous to see the blank space. But usually I'll start to go and then the story then starts to change and I have to make new note cards and I have to add them onto the board and it just kind of grows from there. And so, but yeah, so that's my process now. And I'm happy to say that I kind of have one instead of just being a kind of hot mess of like panic and like getting it out. And and consequently, or maybe not, I don't know, my books are getting longer and longer also. So as they evolve in that course of that outline, but yeah, that's my general process.
I love this. And so how long does it take to write a book for you?
Well, so there's research involved, usually because every single one of my books, either one or both main characters is an artist of some kind. And unless it's an art that I'm familiar with, like I did acting in college, so I know that a little bit, and obviously writing, but like blown glass art, my upcoming gal is a jewelry maker. I know nothing of these. And so I have to research those, which I actually really love because I find that the story grows as I research and I learn new things and new elements that kind of like shape the character because that's what she has to do, or that's what, why she chose that art kind of comes through more fully. So I love doing the research, but that part takes a little bit of time. And I would say if I'm really working and not being lazy, it would take a couple of weeks. And then character development, like who, the names, the family members, that kind of thing. And then when I really, there's a lot of procrastination. So you got to factor in a good 2 weeks of solid procrastination. And then like a light switch kind of just flips on and it starts slowly and then it starts to build up speed. And I think when I'm really getting into that stage, I think it's like 4 to 5 weeks of actual intense writing that gets the actual book done.
I'm fascinated. And so how's your writing during the pandemic? Because there's a lot of anxiety. There's all these different things that are happening. So how's that going?
Well, it's funny. I have two completely separate experiences, and because I have 2 books out so far that released during the pandemic, and the first one was absolute torture, where I had sort of started to fall into a kind of a funk in December at like the holidays of 2019, and it kind of carried through. And then when the pandemic hit in March, it was like compounding onto that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say that The Girl in the Love Song, which I released in June, the writing of that book was like, I would say it's like, it was physically painful sometimes to be typing, and I would be like crying, and I'd be like, every single sentence I typed, I'm like, this is crap. And like, I had such a hard time with that book. And I'm literally amazed that it turned into what it did. I say that I couldn't see it. Like, I couldn't see it as a whole. I didn't know what it was. And I had to really rely on my best beta readers and my editor to like kind of hold my hand through that and say, no, you got it. But then by contrast, the next book, When You Come Back to Me, I kind of came out of that. Like, the pandemic started to, the really super scary part of the pandemic kind of went down a little. I mean, obviously it's still scary, but that initial fear when no one knew what anything was going on and what was going to happen, that kind of subsided. And the next book I wrote, When You Come Back to Me, was a completely different experience. And I loved being at home with my family. They had to stay home. Obviously, they weren't back in school at the time. And I thought that would be a huge distraction. And it turns out it wasn't. It was really nice to just kind of like be in the space together. And my husband is so supportive, and like he would bring me coffee and food while I just typed. And it was, so I had like a just night and day on these two books of how it came out. But generally speaking, I'm always in my office. I'm a homebody anyway. So that aspect of the quarantine didn't really change for me that much. Like I said, just not being able to travel and see readers, that's been the hardest part. My day-to-day life is kind of been the same.
Yeah, I feel like the pandemic has been like, my dates are redundant. They're like basically the same, like nothing has changed.
Right.
But there are things have changed too. So it's like it's a contrast of, very, very mundane things. And I'm like, every day is the same, but it's like Groundhog's Day. And then be like, well, I can travel, I can see my family.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things. So I'm like, oh, my life is different. So
Yeah, it's like when you're into work and doing the work, you don't really think about it as much. And then like when I finished When You Come Back to Me, I was like, well, damn, now I want to go somewhere and like celebrate or whatever. And you just can't.
You can. So let's talk about like the Lost Boys series. Like, what was the source of inspiration for the series, and what can we expect?
Well, it started out as, I was thinking it would be like a vampire. I was thinking, my initial thought was I'd have like brothers who are not necessarily blood brothers, but like maybe either vampires or something supernatural, some kind of like Umbrella Academy type twist to them. That was my initial like spark. And then I was like, I think I just more want to tell stories about real people in the real world. So it kind of pared down to the three guys, but each with their different personalities. And like, I don't know, I saw the three of them so clearly, even before I knew what their stories were going to be about. I knew that Miller was going to be a musician. I knew Holden came from a previous book of mine. He has a teeny tiny mention in Someday Someday. And he just kind of popped out at me as this character that I needed to tell his story. And then Ronan, in the forthcoming book I have yet to write, he's just kind of like, of all, I love to write about broken boys, and he's like probably the most poor baby. So that initial inspiration was brothers, but not bound by blood, but just by like their differences. And they're like, and then when it was a supernatural idea, it was like how they're outsiders because of whatever abilities they were going to end up having. And once I toned that down and just put it in the real world, it was like they're the outcasts or the lost boys, based on either, like in Miller's case, have extreme poverty, or Holden with his own kind of demons, and Ronan with his tortured past, and they became bonded that way. And I just loved, that was like my favorite part of the Lost Boys, or what is really the glue holding them together, is those three guys and their friendship, and how they are like kind of united in their outcastness.
I love this. And so you write emotional books. What's the process like for you to take us on a journey? And I think for as a writer, like, do you do some self-care? Like, do you practice something that just allows you to just get that emotional journey, tortures us, and then at the same time be like, okay, I want to be sane at the same time?
Yeah, well, actually, I think it's kind of like, it's kind of therapeutic in a way. Like, it works out any kind of emotions that I have personally. Like, I can kind of channel it through, and you'll see like like if anyone knows my personal story, my daughter passed away 2 years ago. She was 10 years old. And so you see, even before that though, like it felt like parts of that story of my life were kind of already in my other books that I had already written. And so since that time, you can see flashes of like my experience in all of the books, like if they're dealing with grief, if they're dealing with feeling like people kind of don't understand or not, like understanding that particular experience because it is kind of, it's not terribly universal. And so for me, that's kind of a therapy to kind of help get it out that way. And so they are emotionally draining though, in the sense that once a book is done, I didn't talk about this when we were discussing my process, but I really do have to take time off after a book is done. So the writing of the next book is, like I said, the however many weeks, but I don't get started on it right away. I just can't. I've tried to like be that author who will just be like hit publish, and then they're like the next day they're on Facebook saying, hey guys, I wrote 1,000 words on the next one, and I get so jealous. Like I just can't do that. I have to take like at least a solid month off to kind of recuperate. And then as far as like self-care goes, this may sound like a shameless plug, I'm not being paid by Peloton, but my Peloton bike is like a godsend. Like I don't know what I would do without it. It's like how I can work out excess feelings, or just to move around after being, sitting all day long. So I've worked that into my process, where I have to get up in the middle of the day and go ride on it and kind of get the blood flowing, and like it's non-negotiable now. So I would say that's kind of like the self-care aspect of it, and just taking the time off when I need it. And but yeah, the writing's like it's own little therapy. I don't know what I would do without that either.
Yeah, I can imagine. I find that for me, I journal almost every day, and that's been very therapeutic. Like I have some different things going on that I had to go through some major trauma, and so that journaling, writing, exercising, just doing the things that are just going to nourish my soul can
Right.
be replenishing.
Oh yeah, and it's super important. And journaling, that's great that you do that. That's like when I didn't have a grief counselor anymore, I went to journaling because it's kind of like a therapy where you're just talking it out. Yeah. So that's hugely important. I think people who journal, like, I think I would encourage others to journal if they're struggling, or having trauma like what you and I have experienced, or anyone, just to kind of help get it out, and like put it, I feel it's like if you put it out into the world, at least you're not, it's not sitting inside you, just, stuck.
Yeah. You just have to get it fluid out of your system. I think I call it brain dumps, where you just like dump it out. Like I don't even read back my journals. I just dump it out into something, and it just like it's gonna sit there, and it'll make sense. And later on, maybe going for a walk and maybe something will spark an idea or something. But I think it's just like you just need to get the funk out of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't read mine either, but that only because I can't. My handwriting is so terrible. I literally can't decipher my own handwriting. My friend calls it my serial killer handwriting.
Oh, oh my gosh. So what are you working on next? Are you taking a break right now, and you're planning something else? What's in the horizon for you?
You mean like after the third Lost Boy book? Because that's what's up on deck now. It's like what I'm finally out of that whole month off break thing.
I was just checking.
Yeah. So that's going to be next. And then after that, I have, there's 2 more books I have already pretty much a good idea about. I'm really excited about them. One is, I don't know if you know that anthology that Colleen Hoover did called One More Step.
Yeah.
So the story I have in there features a character from also from Someday, a side character. And so I wrote about her, and then I realized that she has more of a full story. So I'm going to tell hers more completely. And that's actually going to be somewhat lighter than my usual stuff, a little bit, especially after the Lost Boys. It's actually, and of course, lighter by my standards. It's not going to be a rom-com, but slightly lighter than usual. And then the one after that, I'm really excited about too. And I'm excited that I already kind of have it on the horizon. So I'm not like kind of in a panic of like what to do next. But it's an idea that I've been kicking around for like at least like a year and a half. But with these stories, I get an idea, and I don't just immediately start like writing it. Sometimes it has to kind of sit and percolate a little. Be it a year or months. And then finally it's like, okay, it tells me like, now's the time to write this story. So it's possible that this one could could be in front of the one from the One Step anthology, but we'll see like what I'm in the mood for when I finish Ronan's story.
That sounds good. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. So now we're going to some book recommendations. What has been a book that you read this past year that you loved?
So I've kind of slowed down on reading. Like I read a lot of nonfiction lately. For whatever reason, like I just got into a nonfiction kick that has nothing to do with romance. But I did read Queen Move by Kennedy Ryan. I don't remember when, early this year. It seems like kind of a blur. Or was it even last year? No, it was this year. It was this year.
Yeah, it came out this year. So no
Yeah,
worries.
it's like
It's everything's the same. We're in a pandemic.
Yes, exactly. So I read that and I just love Kennedy Ryan. I love her as a human being, first and foremost, but who she is as a human being comes out in her writing as well. And she's just such an intelligent, warm, beautiful person. And that's all in Queen Move. And I just love that book. And so I would highly recommend that. I'm sure most everyone's read it, but if you haven't, then I definitely recommend that book, or really anything from her. Her Grip series is amazing. I read the Kingmaker trilogy or duology. She's just something special.
I love this. So tell us where we can find you online.
So I have a website that my lovely and super awesome brother built for me. It's emmascottwrites.com. And primarily, though, I would say on Instagram at Emma Scott Writes, and then on my reader group, which is called Emma's Entourage on Facebook. Like I said, with the pages, and not to disparage Facebook, but it really is kind of hard to connect with people I find on there. So my reader group is definitely the place where I give all of the news up front and like what's going on in snippets, and that everybody sees. If you want to see something first, that's the place to go.
I love this. Thank you, Emma, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I had a really good time and I appreciate it so much.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support this podcast. Once you connect with fellow romance readers and make new friends, get weekly book recommendations, attend monthly meetups, then join our Patreon community. You can join at whattoreadnextblog.com/Patreon. Romance lovers, check out Queen Bee Reads Etsy shop for cute and comfortable bookish apparel. The shop also features social justice apparel and fun items from some of your favorite TV shows like The Schitt's Creek and The Office. Use code WhatToRead10 to save. Visit whattoreadnextblog.com/QueenBeeReads. What to Read Next podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Discover new podcasts to love on frolic.media/podcast. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.